Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Development Committee. Could I ask everyone to note the fire safety instructions? There are no planned fire drills for tonight. If, however, the alarm goes off, please use the fire exit through the main doors of the hall or the fire exit in the storeroom adjacent to the stage. The fire assembly point is the island in front of the main entrance to the building. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. I would also like to remind you to please switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent. Please note that the meeting will be live streamed where the proceedings are capable of repeated viewing. Please ensure your microphone is switched on when speaking and you speak clearly into the microphone. Once finished speaking, can you please switch off your microphone to avoid feedback noise? If you are seated in the public area of the chamber, it is likely that your image will be captured by the recording cameras and result in your image being part of the broadcast. If members are for any reason not present for the whole debate on an item, you will not be allowed to vote on that item. May I remind members to declare any interest and the nature of the interest at the beginning of an agenda item, and that on declaring a pecuniary interest, you are required to leave the room when that item of business is considered. Item 1, apologies for absence and substitute members. Apologies received from Councillor Squires-Coleman and Councillor Knight.
Sorry, Chair, I'm substituting for Councillor Squires-Coleman.
Next item. It is the next item on the agenda. Substitute members, Councillor Booth for Councillor Squires-Coleman, Councillor Newport for Councillor Knight. Non-members attending, Councillor McPherson, Councillor Steptoe, Councillor Efty and Councillor Marriott. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of March 2024. These minutes have been circulated. Are these agreed? Item 5, to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
I've got one.
Councillor Stanley.
Ward Councillor for Royth, Downhall and Rawliffe, and Rayleigh Town Council. Thank you.
Councillor Page.
Rayleigh Town Council, please, Chair.
Councillor O'Leary.
Rayleigh Town Council as well, please, Chair.
Councillor Lisa Newport.
Non-pecuniary interest, Rayleigh Town Council.
Councillor Mrs Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Rayleigh Town Council, and I would just like to add that I've not been involved in any of the meetings in item 6.2 or item 7. Thank you.
Councillor Booth. Councillor Shaw, Mrs.
Thank you. Essex non-pecuniary interest for Essex County Council. Sorry. Non-pecuniary interest, Essex County Council, capital cabinet Deputy Cabinet Member for Highways, Infrastructure and Sustainable Travel. Thank you.
Councillor Mr Shaw.
Chairman.
I'm chairman of Stanbridge Parish Council. I'm currently interested.
Councillor Myers.
Yeah, Ward Councillor for Great Wakering.
Item 6. Items referred from the weekly list. Item 6, 1. 24-00211 full, 19 Lee Lots, Great Wakering, Essex. John Harrison will present the report.
Thank you. This is a house on a housing estate built around the 1960s. It's a one marked with a red line in the middle of the site. So it's a corner plot. It's most of the houses are sort of typical 3-bedroom, but this one has been extended at the side, so it's larger than most in the vicinity. Next slide, please. The proposal is to use it as supported bed-sit accommodation for people who've had mental health issues, who are looking to move back to live into the community. There would be 5 people in bed-sits plus staff, 2 staff members during the day and 1 at night to supervise them. I'll be talking about that in a few more minutes, but that's the floor plans of the property. Next, please. These are some photos of the house. As you can see, it's been extended on the side with front and rear extensions as well to the extension, if you see what I mean. So it's, had about half as much again added onto it, plus the projections at the front and rear. Next slide, please. One of the issues we'll be talking about is car parking. In front there is room for 4 cars, but the inner 2 cars will be trapped, so if they needed to come out of the cars out on the outer space, some juggling would be necessary. Next slide, please. That's a further view. Next slide, please. And that's the view from across the road. And I think there's one more. And that's taken from Rushley Close from the rear. The property itself is, of course, rather hidden by trees, but you get an idea of what its location is like. I see 3 particular issues which you will want to consider. The first one is what we could call safeguarding issues, possible harm, etc., to neighbours and others in the vicinity. This is going to be a halfway house for people coming out of mental health treatment, and the idea will be to move them into the community. In due course, they will be given training on cooking and shopping and things like that, but also taught to make sure they take their medicine regularly, etc. They will have been assessed by clinicians, and they will be placed in the premises by local authorities. So assessments will have been made that they will be capable of living in the community without being disruptive, and assuming they are successful in moving on, in due course, they will be living in the community with little supervision. So this is a halfway house, and we're recommending that there should always be a member of staff on premises. Problems are unlikely to occur, but that would be a safeguard. They will be able to deal with any difficulties that do occur. Moving on to the second issue, parking and highway issues. Essex County Council's Highway Authority have not objected to the application. We are aware that there are 2 parking issues in Lee lots. The residents have told us about those and sent photos. Firstly, the school, which is the other side of the high street, quite often in the morning and closing time, parents will be parking in this street, blocking driveways, holding up traffic, creating potentially slightly dangerous situations. Also at weekends, the school lets the pitches out to football clubs, but they don't allow the players and spectators to park on the site. So they are parking anywhere and everywhere and causing problems. As I've explained, there's room to park 4 cars on the site. Although Essex County Council has parking standards for some C2 users, this doesn't really fit any of them. But bearing in mind there'll be 1 or 2 staff members, and assuming they come by car, we would envisage they would park on the inner spaces so that visitors to the residents, doctors, social workers, others who might come to the premises who would be there for a shorter time would park in the outer spaces. There may be times when there is overflow, but there again, for houses in the street, if there's a family with grown-up children, each with their own car, or if somebody is having lots of friends round, there will be overflows. We don't think this will be significantly worse than might occur with other houses in the street. And it may slightly add to the inconvenience when the school's starting and finishing and when the football people are parking, but we don't think it would cause much harm, and our view is it would justify refusing permission for that reason. The third issue is the noise and activity from the premises. Because it's a fairly intensive use, we envisage there will be a bit more traffic, that there'll be the staff coming and going, there will be people like doctors and social workers visiting, but we don't think that will be so bad that it would justify refusing planning permission, bearing in mind other residents, they go out to work to take the children to school. There are delivery vans with stuff bought on the net, etc. So, the additional traffic won't be very much more than other dwellings in the road and will not be all that noticeable. That is, we accept a fairly balanced recommendation, but that is our view. One point which needs a bit of clarification, I perhaps should say that there's an addendum where the parish council and other neighbours' comments have been reported. The parish council has raised a query about the distance between the site and the school. That's, as I said, is on the opposite side of the high street. So I put in my report it was 2.25. Sorry, it was 0.25 kilometres. That was the road distance taken off the internet. I was doing the report at home and couldn't do an actual measurement. The parish council's measurement is presumably...
Sorry, John, could you bear with me a second? Please, members of the public, could we have silence while the report is being read? Thank you.
I'd almost finished, yeah. The parish council measurement, I presume, is a direct building-to-building distance. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, John. There are 2 public speakers for this item. The public speakers have 5 minutes to speak and only 5 minutes to speak. The first speaker is a Miss Sabudu, who will speak in support of the application. Would you like to come forward? Mike, if you could help out, please. When you're ready, thank you.
Okay. May I say good evening to the chairman of the committee and members, as well as everyone here tonight. I'd like to use this opportunity.
Could you put the microphone closer to you, please?
Okay. I'd like to use this opportunity to provide further clarification on some of the concerns raised in objection to the application. It is of note that these issues have been addressed in some way by the supporting information provided, as well as the council's officer's report. It is hoped that tonight's reiteration would offer reassurance and help to allay the fears and concerns that have risen. In the UK, 25% of the population would experience a mental health problem at some point in their lives. For most people, the symptoms will be relatively minor, but others may require long-term or specialist support in order for them to recover or to manage their conditions. There's still a strong stigma and discrimination around mental health. 88% of people living with severe mental illness report that discrimination is still widespread in the UK, as reflected in 98% of the objections received. Society can have stereotyped views about mental ill health. Some people believe people with mental health problems are dangerous, when in fact they are at a higher risk of being attacked or harming themselves than hurting other people. Media reports often link mental ill health with violence or portray people with mental health problems as dangerous, criminal, evil, or very disabled and unable to live normal, fulfilled lives. The Equality Act protects certain groups of people from unfair treatment and discrimination, in this case, mental health. As stated in the application, the property is to provide care and accommodation for 5 unrelated vulnerable adults impacted by mental ill health between the ages of 18 and 65. Living independently in the house as a supported living accommodation scheme with focus on empowering, enablement, and recovery. Supported living should support people with disabilities to live their lives with as much independence as possible, in line with the well-being principle under the Care Act 2014, within the home and the community. As it is recognized that mental health problems affect everyone in very different ways, hence there are ranges of services designed to meet variety of needs to ensure that individuals are receiving the most appropriate services for their needs. These individuals prior to placement undergo comprehensive assessment detailing their individual needs by trained professionals to identify the appropriate service for their needs and level of risk. Levels of supported accommodation are often classed as low, medium, and support needs. The proposed plan is for the lowest category, providing low support due to their needs and risk. This category of providers do not require regulation by the regulatory body CQC due to the level of risk associated with this type of service. However, to ensure the quality and safety of service users, assessments and reviews per property will be undertaken during the contract initiation and throughout by the commissioners to ensure an appropriate level of provision is being provided to tenants. Providers would also abide by other national regulations and policies that are meant to be adhered to for the well-being of the residents, as well as its impact on the neighborhood. Without repeating the already addressed responses, I would like to reiterate that staffing levels will be adjusted according to the needs of the service as appropriate. And that
1 minute left to speak.
Sorry?
1 minute left to speak.
Okay. And the service will be providing 24-hour staffing, which is above the minimum requirements of on-call night staff as required by this type of service, to put to rest the fears of the local resident. And also of note, the traffic envisaged for the service will be lower than anticipated, as the resident would not be housebound or elderly and will attend their own appointments outside of the property. There's also the consideration that Great Wakering geographically is unsuitable for this service. However, Little Wakering has a much larger facility of 13 residents, which has been operating for over 6 years with no negative impact to the community. Having a safe and stable place to call home is vital for everyone's mental health. Supported housing has a pivotal role to play in addressing this, and the quality and quantity of supported housing available to people with severe mental illness is not where it needs to be. So I respectfully request that the planning permission is granted, as the proposal will deliver very significant positive benefits.
Thank you. Your 5 minutes is up. Thank you very much for that presentation. The second speaker is Miss Burney, who will speak in objection to the application. I will remind Miss Burney, you also have 5 minutes to speak. Thank you. Mike, if you could help out, please.
Good evening, councillors. Lee Lots is a quiet residential community and is homes for the elderly and families with children of all ages, many being young. Please refer to slide 1. These screenshots have been taken from social media from a few residents complaining about the current traffic and parking problems already down Lee Lots. There is many more like this. Can you please go to slide 2? As you can see from the photos taken, at various times there are several issues already with parking down Lee Lots. Having additional vehicles from 19 Lee Lots, as in staff, visitors, doctors, nurses, physios, social workers, family and deliveries will only make it worse, particularly during school drop-off and collection times. It will also cause problems at weekends when the football is on at the school and the recreation field. People use Lee Lots to park and access the recreation field when football is on. Emergency services have problems getting through already due to the dangerous parking and the amount of traffic. Having the extra vehicles will increase the volumes of traffic and disruption to our community. Can you please go to slide 3? These photos show the number of cars that are regularly parked on the corner of 19 Lee Lots. There will be no room for additional vehicles, which means parking further down the road, causing more disturbance to the other residents down Lee Lots. Can you go to 4, please? Thank you. The current proposal states 4 cars can be parked on the drive. As you can see from the photo A and B, these plans show only 3. As per the vehicle crossing criteria, it is illegal to mount a curb to access a property. The red lines in photo C show where the drop curb ends, which means that they will have to either mount the curb or move vehicles on and off to allow other vehicles to access the drive. This means there will be an increase of manoeuvring vehicles throughout the day, especially on a blind corner. Can you please go to slide? Thank you. These are statements from a traffic report on the Great Wakering Parish Council website, highlighting the concerns and problems for parking and traffic at present down Lee Lots. Again, having an increase of vehicles will only add to these problems. Slide 6. Thank you. Safeguarding is a concern to the community because the house in question is only 196.64 metres, which is 0.12 kilometres away from the primary school. Having more vehicles down Lee Lots puts the children further at risk due to heavy traffic and more vehicles coming on and off driveways. The older pupils must leave school approximately at 6:40 in the morning in the dark. This puts them at higher risks with more vehicles. The plan in this application does not show any fire exits on the ground floor. It is a legal requirement to have at least one fire exit and must be certified as per the fire door legislation 2024. Another concern raised is wherein will medication be securely stored. This is also not on the plans mentioned or within documents. I would have shown a small clip, but the incident only happened yesterday morning. A young child came out of their property down Lee Lots and was nearly hit by a car. The car decided to mount the curb to avoid oncoming traffic. During certain periods of the day, Lee Lots has lots of young children walking up and down and also playing in the street. I'd also like to say, I would like to highlight the office report only refers to 7 objections.
1 minute to go.
There are 33 recorded. The report should be updated to reflect the 33 objections. I would also like to point out that the residents of Lee Lots have a petition which currently stands at 160 and continue to rise. Please take the consideration of the concerns of the residents in your decision. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Would any visiting members wish to speak? Councillor McPherson will be speaking as a ward member.
Thank you, Chairman.
I just remind you, Councillor McPherson, you also have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Dear members, I will start by referring you to the conclusion of the report. Members, please refer to page 6.1.4, point 13. It gives mention to the National Planning Policy Framework and how it encourages local authorities to consider housing provision for all types of needs. This is a statement we can all concur with. However, the location needs to be right, not just for existing residents, but also for new residents, so they may thrive cohesively in our communities. This location, members, is not suitable. I will refer to point 11 of the report on page 6.1.4. Opening statement. The use would not be likely to generate significant amounts of traffic. Now, you've got some pictures coming up there. I can tell you now, only one of those was taken during the school run. And I will tell you, at school run time, it is absolutely bedlam. For those of you who have ever had children, little 3-foot-high people run everywhere. If this was to be permitted, it will at times have emergency vehicles visit those premises. Would you like to be an ambulance driver whizzing around that corner when there's children around? There is going to be a heightened risk. Members, have you consulted with the emergency services if they too believe there will be a heightened risk at certain times of the day? And please don't think this is just a school run time. As has been pointed out, the school, now an academy, runs as a business. Those premises are well used. They are used, as has been mentioned, by football clubs. So you have teams of people, and trust me, they don't car share. They all come in different cars. You've got the football practices the day before. You've got the netball club. You've got the cricket club. You've got a climbing wall there. And this doesn't even take into account the odd events, craft fairs, fetes, etc. It is a busy part of the road. So don't worry about that. There's lots of parking spaces, isn't there? There's 4. Now, if these people who are staying there are going to integrate into our community, do they not also drive? So if you added the need for the staff, the need for the people who live there and visitors, we're talking at least 9 spaces. Then earlier, the person speaking in support of this report said that they may actually up staffing levels at certain times. So now we're talking about 10 spaces. So you can work out the mathematics there, members. If the committee has not already had a site visit, I would strongly suggest one, and that is for you members to consider. I can only speak to the committee on material considerations. But one thing I will say is I doubt that there's very few people in this room who have at some time not suffered poor mental health. I do have some concerns though. The speaker earlier in support mentioned that it will be low risk. These people will be assessed as low risk. Yet in front of you, written quite clearly, it does say mild to moderate mental illness. I would urge for some clarity on that. You will not be able to give it to us, but perhaps
1 minute to
somebody
go.
else can. Thank you, Chairman. Because even with any assessment, the word moderate does raise concerns. And I think, committee members, that's just about it. So thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members, for your time.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Councillor FD, you've also requested to speak as a ward member.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. I see some issues with this report. The change of use from C3 to a C2 with rooms for 5 separate residents living at this address with only 4 parking spaces, 2 being used to operate the facility during the day and 1 at night. What visitor parking is there? As when 19 Lee Lots was a 3-bedroom house, it would have complied with RDC parking standards. It is now going to be a 5-bedroom house. The officer states that it is unlikely that the residents will have cars. Underline the word unlikely. The officer is assuming, with the officer's report stating that there will be an increase in traffic with workers coming and going, visitors, visiting professionals, and possibly deliveries of supplies. Where are all these people going to park? And he assumes that the residents will not have a car. And as Woking has no public transport after 8 p.m. and 4 buses on a Sunday, if I was a resident there, I would have a car if I could afford one. As there is no room for more parking on the surrounding streets, where are all these people going to park? Or will they double park, causing more traffic chaos? Lee Lots also has issues around school drop-off and pick-up times and Saturday morning football. That is played at the primary school on the High Street, which is 1.6 kilometres according to the parish and 1.2 kilometres according to the residents, not 0.25 kilometres, which is stated in the report. As previously stated, the distance of the school away from the property, and it is my opinion that the proximity to the junior school is an issue with safeguarding, as the change of use to a C2 does not restrict the types of people living in the property, which is situated in a small residential cul-de-sac off a busy main road adjacent to a primary school. In my opinion, at the very least, the members of the committee should take time to attend a site visit to see for themselves the parking issues around Lee Lots and the safeguarding concerns, or they can disagree with the officer's recommendation and refuse the change of use from C2 to C3 tonight. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor FD. Councillor Steptoe, also requested to speak on this matter.
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I start, though, I would like to just mention that I am also a member of Essex County Council.
Noted.
Okay. Members, I don't want to repeat everything else the previous speakers have spoken with regards to the parking issue, but I'm sure you've realised that that is going to be an extremely serious issue for the area. I would like to remind the committee that not so long ago, probably a couple of months now, there was a very similar application in Little Wakering Road. And that was rejected on very similar issues that now are occurring in Lee Lots. The roads were never designed to take the number of vehicles that they now take. Back in the 50s, when these roads were built, there was probably no more than 3 or 4 cars in the whole road. Something you do need to consider is, as people use the premises, as has been mentioned, with regards to visitors, people staying there, the staff, they will displace other vehicles that are already in the road. So where are they going to move to? So displacement is going to be an issue. It is exceptionally close to the school, and because of the design of Great Wakering High Street, when you think that road goes back many, many years, again, never designed to take the amount of traffic that it now has. It is, as somebody else mentioned earlier on, it is absolute chaos there at school drop-off and particularly pick-up time. Members, I am very keen on having care in the community, but what I would emphasise is that's got to fit into the community. And I don't believe that this is the right place for this type of facility. As already been mentioned, there's very little facilities around there at night. So I think you need to consider, and I hope that you will take this very seriously, that it needs to care for the community in the way that it operates and is running. Members, I think that probably covers just about what I wanted to say, but I would urge members to consider refusal of this application. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Any committee members wishing to speak? Councillor Myers.
As a ward councillor, I think I should have been given an opportunity to speak anyway, but that's by the by. The only thing I would say is I actually spent an hour down in Lee Lots the other morning at school drop-off time, and it is absolute chaos. I mean, the report initially, Mr. Harrison stated that with the football teams and the schools and everyone else turned up, it's got the possibilities of being dangerous. And I think that for him to actually sit there and say that shows the amount of level of parking and aggravation there is in this particular road. But we shall wait until all the whole evidence has been received, and I will make a decision once everything's been heard.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. A few points, really. None of us who are in society these days can really have any objection to the need for mental health provision. But as many of the members have actually already muted, needs to be the right provision in the right place. One of the things that I struggle with on this is that in the report, the Highways Authority say they have no objection. But they do request an area for material storage, and there's no building work. This is an indication of the standard of the reports that we get from Essex Highways that continually let Rochford District Council down. I think there is evidence here in the fallibility of Essex Highways report by initially saying there's no objection, but also then requesting area for material storage that isn't needed. So that's one point. And I'd like to ask, Chair, if I can, through you, for our legal representative, Tom Newcombe. When we come to residential amenity, one of the things that isn't picked up in the report at all is the effect on the next door neighbour. Now, we cannot begin to guess the level of disturbance that the joined building is going to create to the next door neighbour on a semi-detached house. Are we going to have people who are going to be residents in there who are going to be susceptible to sound and therefore react accordingly? Are we going to have residents in there who are going to create sound? These are things that we can't answer. So I wanted to know if these are sort of things that obviously it would actually affect the residential amenity, and would that be something that would be a condition that we could call on as part of a refusal?
Well, I'll answer in two parts. I mean, firstly, the impact on residential amenity is a material consideration. And so your consideration based on the report and all the evidence that you've heard and are hearing in relation to what potential impacts there might be on residential amenity would be something that you can bear in mind in your decision making. I think you've got to be careful not to go too far, because we don't know the identity of the individual residents in this premises. And so I don't think that you should stray into the realms of speculation as to what the impact on their amenity might be due to the various illnesses that they might be suffering. But in terms of what the impact on the neighbouring property and their amenity might be, it's what's been presented to you and the comments that have been made are in relation to the parking issues in particular. And I think that is something that you can take into account. I'm not quite sure I understand the second part of your question in relation to the condition on a refusal. Do you mean if you were to approve it, could you apply a condition in relation to amenity, or do you mean as a reason for refusal impact on residential
As
amenity?
a reason for refusal, because the change of classification of use to what it's actually proposed to be used for, as it has a semi-detached classification, the possible impact is, I think, a material consideration. But I'm not a professional, that's why I'm asking yourself for guidance on that.
Well, I think therefore in my first answer, I've probably answered that in that the impact on residential amenity of the surrounding residents could be a reason for refusal. Yes.
Okay,
Chair.
if
whether Mike or John want to add anything further to that from a planning point of view.
It would be open if members are minded to approve the application to put a condition about soundproofing. I did consider that in drafting the report, but bearing in mind, as well as immediate next door neighbours, there will be 4 other residents of the place and a staff member in looking after the premises. Any sort of late night noise or similar problems would, I think, be dealt with by the management and the other residents rather than, so I didn't think such a condition was necessary, but it's open to you to impose one if you're so minded.
Chair, if I may.
Thank you, John. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I think because of the disparity that we are hearing between what highways have actually given us in this report and what we are hearing from the representation, not only from residents, but also from members, I would like to propose a deferment for a site visit, please.
Chair, can I come in there before you do that?
Councillor Eaves, I'll take into consideration for a minute, but I would like to hear from Councillor Shaw and Councillor Constable first. Councillor
you.
Shaw.
Going on what Councillor Eaves has said with Essex County Council Highways, they don't just send out a one-word, one-line on their conditions, or do they approve it? Don't they approve it? It's an A4 sheet of paper. And I've said this on various, and Councillor Mike Steptoe will have got a copy because he is the division. But I've asked on many occasions when we've been sitting here, can we see the full report from Essex County Council? And this has not been done. And just to get a one sentence is not acceptable. We cannot make decisions on this, I'm afraid. So I would like that put in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. 1 second. Yes, we've actually got the report here. We will read it out to you.
So the response from Essex County Council says, the information that was submitted in association with the application has been fully considered by the Highway Authority. The proposed change of use from C3 to C2 includes 4 off-street parking spaces within the curtilage. Therefore, from a highway and transportation perspective, the impact of the proposal is acceptable to the Highway Authority, subject to the following condition. Areas within the curtilage of the site for the purpose of the reception and storage of building materials shall be identified clear of the highway. Reason, to ensure that appropriate loading and unloading facilities are available to ensure that the highway is not obstructed during the construction period in the interest of highway safety in accordance with policy DM1. The above condition is to ensure that the proposal conforms to the relevant policies contained within the County Highways Authority development management policies adopted by the County Council in February 2011.
Councillor Shaw, would you like to come back on that?
No, thank you for that. But instead of you actually reading it out, can I ask that these reports actually come into what we're reading? Thank you. So we have a better understanding. Thank you.
That has been noted.
Thank you.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make an observation on the parking. A lot has been said about the numbers. Now, we're talking about a 5-bedroom detached house. So if you had 2 adults and 3 or 4 adult children, that's several cars, possibly. If their friends then visited them, you could have up to 10 or 15 cars around there at any one time. So I think we need to bear in mind that on the parking consideration. But more importantly, I've got a question to the officers on the property. We're talking about 5 adults here, and it's 1 bathroom upstairs with an ensuite downstairs with no mention of a downstairs toilet or anything. So for 5 adults to have to use up to 1 bathroom, or at least 4 of them upstairs using 1 bathroom, I think that is in itself quite inadequate for a care home or an adult, a place of this description. So on that basis, purely on that side of things, I think that is a material consideration for a refusal. I've also visited the site. I had a drive around there yesterday, and I don't think we need to defer it for a site visit. I think we've got enough information today to make up our minds on what we want to do. I think deferring it is just going to kick it further down the road. It's what it is. The photographs show exactly what it is, and they show where it is and the situation. So I don't think a site visit would make any difference. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Constable, and Councillor Eaves. I was going to say a few words in response to you, but we'll let Councillor Stanley come in first.
Thank you, Chairman. From what I've heard from our solicitor in relation to that these are likely or unlikely or can, it seems to me that the officer hasn't done his due diligence, because he's just said, assuming that they can control it, assuming there will be enough officers, assuming. We can't make a decision on somebody assuming that everything will be okay, assuming that they won't be parking there, assuming there won't be a lot of things that are happening. I find it very difficult to make a decision on assuming things, making it as if, oh, well, they can deal with that when they come to deal with it. Well, that's not the case, the way I see it. There must be some order of containment of residents, containment of the situation, and that's for one. The other thing that I get is that we have a policy on parking standards, And this is not meeting our parking standards, in as much as the residents could have cars. They could have visitors. And if you've got 5 people in there and you've got 5 visitors, where are you going to put those cars? On top of winter time can be very, very disturbing to the residents, in as much as the transport coming backwards and forwards to hospital and such like. You've got doctor visits. Where are they going to park? That's the problem, and where it is at the moment, as has already been said, about the next door neighbour. Now, if this was a standalone property, I couldn't see a problem where they could actually make an entry to the back garden to put parking in and such like, but it's not a standalone property. This is a semi-detached property. And as such, it has been suited for that area. The property is suited for that area. It's not as though it is suited for 5 people living independent lives. And I really can't see a way forward on this, but to keep it as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Interesting viewpoint, because Councillor Constable, as he said, if it was a 5-bedroom and you had 5 adults being in there, you would have the same situation. So that's one which we have to take into consideration. I would like clarification, though, on the amount of bathrooms in there, because I'm sure I've seen somewhere in the report there was either 3 or 4 bathrooms and not 1 bathroom.
From memory, it was 3.
I've seen it somewhere in.
Yes, two bathrooms.
If you could just double check that for me, and if I could ask for members, please. If you could double check that for me. In the meantime, Councillor Newport, Councillor Mrs. Newport.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just have some clarification? It's 5 beds for 5 residents. Is there a bedroom for staff members that stay overnight? So it's effectively 6 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms? Thank you.
Yes.
John, yes, please.
Yes, there's a 6-bedroom for a overnight staff member. Regarding bathrooms, yes, there's 2 communal bathrooms and 1 ensuite.
So effectively, six people staying in the house with 2 bathrooms and an ensuite, okay, and no separate bathroom for the staff member. Okay, thank you, members of the public. I will ask the questions down here, but that's what I'm getting clarification of. Please, if you could clarify exactly how many rooms, how many staff, how many members, and how many bathrooms, and where those bathrooms are, please.
Three.
And how many bedrooms?
5 for residents and 1 for a staff member.
So six bedrooms, 6 separate bedrooms, not communal bedrooms, 6 separate bedrooms, and 3 bathrooms. Members, hold on a second. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. So is that 3 bathrooms? Is that 3 bathrooms including the ensuite, or 3 bathrooms plus an ensuite?
Including the ensuite.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, obviously, all of the members are confused regarding this, so your report can't be clear enough to actually, and I notice you, John, have just asked the question as well. So can we absolutely clarify that point? There are 6 bedrooms for 6 people and 3 bathrooms. Are we okay with that, members?
Chair, can we go up and actually look at that? Because I cannot not actually see that from here on the side angle. Do you mind?
Councillor Shaw, be my guest.
Yeah, just because it's so small I couldn't see it. Do you mind? So I can see where we're going. Cheers.
Can you point them out?
Chairman, if it helps, let's walk around the ground floor and first floor of the building. We come in the
Thank you very
hallway.
much.
We come in the hallway, and you'll see there's a lounge, there's a staff room, and then you'll see there's a bedroom on the front here, bathroom number 1, then a utility room, then an ensuite to that bedroom. Yeah? Sorry, that's a kitchen. The problem is, I think it's because it's written in red. It's not got the clarity of black. So we go upstairs. There's a staff visitors room. There's a bedroom, a bedroom, a bedroom, and there's a bathroom here. So there's bathroom 1, bathroom 2 on the ground floor, ensuite on the ground floor. Now, the staff quarters aren't identified as bedrooms as such. My understanding of these kind of premises is that the staff are sort of awake or kipping, perhaps, because obviously they can't go to bed as the residents would in case they need to be woken because there's an issue. So they're at work during the night, probably doing something quietly whilst the residents sleep. So there is a staff room and visitors room, they refer to it as well, if people come to see perhaps a resident there and they want a quiet space away from the others to talk. There's a staff room downstairs. So I'd imagine the operation of it would be that the staff would switch between these 2 rooms, particularly during the night. So hopefully that's clear. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms upstairs, a 5th bedroom downstairs with the ensuite, 2 bathrooms, and we've got 2 rooms that are sort of double up as staff quarters. Whether one of those would have a bed in it, I don't know.
Thank you, Mike. Are we all clear on this now? Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. So there's no facilities for visitors in regards of toilets. They'd need to use one of the main bathrooms. Is that correct? Thank you.
Councillor Page.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the visitors room, you're saying if they want to come and visit, but are they allowed to stay overnight, please?
Chairman, we don't have that information.
Okay, because I was thinking about parking and that type of arrangement. Yeah, thank you. It's a staff room as well, yes, so, yeah.
Councillor Mrs Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask the officers, if I may, please, has this property, this care home, whatever title it will be given, got approval by the Care Commission?
This is of a nature that I gather where the Care and Quality Commission isn't involved because they are low risk people.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Going back to the bathrooms, sorry, Chair. Are they designed for disabled people? It's not a hard question,
John,
I'm afraid.
We've not been told.
That has got to be surely a consideration, that because we do not know the residents that are going in there, some will be maybe of an age that they need a wet room for age or disability. We do need to know, this is very important to know what these bathrooms are like, and I don't think we've got enough in this report that's been given to us tonight to make an informed decision. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Newport.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive my naivety. Is this care facility going to be regulated in any way?
There is obviously general legislation like health and safety legislation, but also the local authorities will be placing people there, and obviously they will need to make sure that there's suitable premises, and obviously if it's disabled people, it's suitable in that respect.
And if I may come back, so as it's been stated, it's low risk or it's medium to moderate risk in one statement. Are the residents likely to be assessed? Because obviously, as everyone appreciates, with mental health conditions, you can deteriorate and have good days and bad days. I just want to know if it would be a regularly assessed facility.
We've been told that they will be assessed before they come in. I would presume if a resident is deteriorating, health professionals would be called in and the situation would be reviewed. That would be common sense.
Thank you, John. Councillor Myers.
Yeah, having heard all the people have said, I think the biggest problem this property has against its application is the parking. You can go on about bathrooms and all the other bits and pieces. The road isn't designed and there's not enough room for whatever vehicles may be turning up at this premises. There is no way around that problem. We've seen photographs of the road. I've actually seen it myself. There is no, even if they've got 5, 6 bathrooms in it, it's not going to make any difference to the street outside.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. We got to take into consideration that we need to agree or disagree on a material planning consideration. From the information that I've heard so far, there's too many questions, unanswered questions, and too many gaps within the report for us to be able to make a decision. So I would put it through that we would defer the decision and all questions be emailed through to John so that we can literally come with a comprehensive understanding of what we're actually making our decisions on.
Chair, I would very much like to second that motion that you've just put forward, please.
Chair, sorry, can I come in? Sorry,
Councillor
Councillor
Shaw.
Page. Sorry, Councillor Page. This is not how it's done usually. It's usually that we ask questions that our officers will come back to us on. We do not individually email them to our officers. That should have been done before we had this meeting. So I've seen our officers writing down what questions we've had. I would suggest that we defer this.
Yeah.
It comes back to the committee with all the questions answered and a proper report.
That's exactly what I've just said, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Mrs. Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I feel quite strongly that I think a site visit would also help, particularly for us that don't live particularly local to this area. I would find that helpful myself. Thank you.
Members, due to the fact that there's already an issue with parking and transport down there, I don't feel that we should all go down en masse to go and have a look at the parking issues. So if we go for deferment, you can individually go down there and actually assess the area yourself. But I do feel that we need the report to be looked at, and some of the questions which have been asked tonight to be put in, and then the report come back to the next committee. That is. Before we go to a vote, Caroline Corrigan would like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Just to assist the committee in the reasons for deferral and some of the questions that you might want answered before this comes back to committee, if that's what you decide to do. So there's a clarification of parking standards for this type of use. Also the type of business and clientele that would be occupying the premises, and the space standards of each of the bedrooms and the bathrooms. So that would be a starter for 10 that officers can go away and start looking at for you. Thank you.
Any other material planning considerations that you can think? Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. Planning considerations should be on parking, and it would be better if the officers could give us a dimension of the parking area for considerable amount of cars, And also, I do believe that a bathroom or some sort of convenience, if I like to put it like that, to each of the bedrooms, as if that one is occupied and we get an emergency with another person, there isn't somewhere for them to go. There are 5 bedrooms, and I believe that there should be adequate accommodation for that sort of purpose. The other thing that really gets to me is that it's staff shortages. Now, one staff cannot manage 5 people if everything goes topsy-turvy of a night. And I don't believe that there is staff adequacy of a night period. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Councillor Eaves.
Yeah, the question was on the effect on residential amenity for the attached house as well. That's not mentioned in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eaves. I think you also brought up a question regarding the highways and a material store. I think I've read in the report somewhere that the building has already been converted or part converted. Can we actually clarify that, please?
When I spoke to the applicant about this, she said that the premises have been refurbished inside with a view that if this gets permission, it can go in that direction. If it doesn't, it could be used as an ordinary family house.
So have we got internal pictures of what's actually the works that have been done?
We've only got the plans. One of our enforcement officers has visited, but I haven't visited.
Okay. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you. I don't know if we can do this for a question, but could we? I've noticed about there's not going to be an alarm external, but could we actually ask if an alarm could be put in there in case of an emergency? It's got a fire alarm, fine, but as we said, if one of these residents has an issue, for whatever reason, one member of staff may need to hit an alarm for the 999 services, police, fire, or ambulance. They need that in as a condition. Can I ask if that can be looked at, please? Thank you.
In the report, I dealt with the issue of noisy alarms because the immediate neighbour had expressed concern about that. Presumably a emergency 999 call would go straight to the emergency services, it wouldn't have an audible alarm. Is it? Sorry, have I misunderstood that?
Yes, you have. Unfortunately, in some junior schools and nursery schools, they have a panic button that they just have to hit. There's no actually bells and alarms go through the school. It goes direct to the emergency services to say there's a problem.
Thank
So
you.
that's why I'm actually asking if that could be asked, if that could be installed.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. So that we can actually make a decision when this comes back to committee, if in fact you do defer and it comes back to committee, can we make sure that all of your questions are out in the open now so that the officers can actually come back so we can just make a decision based on that? Mr. Stranks?
Sorry, Chair, just hearing what you said there, taking on board everything that everybody's asking, I can't guarantee when we'll get all the answers back if it involves different agencies. So if members were expecting this to return in July, that might be optimistic. We might get most of the answers, but then again, I'm not sure if that's exactly what you just meant. But I was just wondering at the moment if when you said make sure when this comes back to committee, you was meaning the very next committee. We might not be able to get it all done by then, is the point I'm making.
Okay, I think the questions that we've asked are not that difficult, so hopefully we would be able to get some answers. But what timescale would you believe that you would be able to come up with the answers?
If we have to talk to social services, and bearing in mind we're on the cusp of the holiday season, I don't know how long I would need to get to the people I need the answers from. And then with your long lead-in times to committee, you have to write the reports a month before the committee meets. So if we got the answers in July, but it might be the September committee before you get the report, if you see what I mean. That was my dilemma.
Members, can you take that into consideration when you go to vote? It has been proposed and seconded that we defer until such time as we've got all of the relevant information in a full report in respect of this particular application. Should we go to the vote? All in favour of deferment? Those against? And those abstaining? That vote is carried for deferment. Members, I now take item 6.2, 23-00138, full land opposite 2 Goldsmith Drive, Rayleigh. Mike Stranks will present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is to the site on the southern side of Goldsmith Drive. You'll see slightly L-shaped, edged in the bolder red outline for members that can see that. Okay. Cheers. I'll start again, Chairman. That's better, isn't it? Yeah. This application you'll see on the screen before you in the bold orange red outline there. It's part of the sort of Plotland area, Goldsmith Drive, an unmade road, Holbridge Road to Holbridge to the north and Rayleigh to the south. It's, as I say, it's an irregular shaped plot, and it's within the Metropolitan Green Belt. If we can see the existing layout plan, please, number 2. Planning permission was granted on appeal in 2021 to use this site, as you see on the plan here, with an access into the site, long straight access, gated, recessed gated access onto Goldsmith Drive, widening out at the back. This area is sort of left overgrown, landscaped, call it what you will, but there's a fenced access track down here. All the track and the hard standing area there is all down to chippings, and you'll see that the approval gave permission for 2 static mobile homes, a day room, and touring caravans. When planners talk of a pitch is a home for a Gypsy or Romany family, and they need a settled base, one that's, if you like, fixed to the ground, connected to drainage, that sort of thing, and then a touring caravan, which is what they hitch up and go travelling. So a pitch usually provides the static home, normally the larger. The touring caravan, these are a couple of parking spaces you see here, but they also sometimes have what they call a day room, which is where they do a lot of their laundry and housekeeping, things like that, sometimes have meals in there. So it's not unusual to find a pitch to comprise a static caravan, a tourer, and a day room. Hopefully that's clear. This approval gave 2 mobiles, 2 tourers, and 1 day room because the family shared the day room. If we could go to the proposed Plan 6, thank you. What happened a little while ago was that some caravans were brought onto the site, and the council's enforcement officers approached them. What's arisen out of that is an application to expand the site with approval and provide another 3 static caravans, another 3 tourers, and an additional day room. The actual planning application before you speaks to 2 day rooms, but what this layout shows is actually the existing day room from the previous approval that hasn't been built, plus another day room. So what you would effectively have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 families with 2 day rooms. So the proposal is a further intensification of the site, going from 2 households primarily to 5 households, because the households would use the statics, the mobile homes. The touring caravans is used for their culture and travelling. The additional pitches that you see there are for the applicant's 2 daughters and niece and their respective partners and families. That's set out in better detail in paragraph 45 of the report. The proposal would provide a settled home for the applicant's extended family to maintain a travelling way of life, but also to receive as a base, as a home, to receive any planned care, support, education and services. Now, the ethnicity and personal circumstances of an applicant wouldn't normally be a significant material consideration. However, it is recognised that the needs of those who can substantiate a gypsy and travelling status for planning purposes, and this applicant has been accepted by the council and an appeal inspector as being a traveller, they call for special consideration, because the idea of the national law and guidance is that it's to maintain or give them the opportunity to maintain their way of life. So that requires a special consideration in the government's overarching aim to ensure that fair and equal treatment of travellers in that facilitates their traditional nomadic way of life. Whilst the use proposed is considered inappropriate in green belt terms, because where you see no development, where the site is if you like, bare or covered in trees and scrub, there is no built form there, the provision of the base and the statics, and I think the tours are being provided on the existing hardstanding, is clearly inappropriate development. But the failure of the delivery of the council's allocated site at Michelin's Farm to bring forward public provision or any kind of provision gives you an unmet need at the current provision of 23 pitches that the district is short of. So this application would help deliver that, and that delivery of the quantum of sites outstanding, because our green belt boundaries are drawn so tight to the existing settlements, it means any future housing provision, industrial provision, gypsy site provision, public open space provision are all going to be met from release of land, or most of it going to be met from release of land from the green belt. So what's happened is that inspectors on appeal, you'll see in the history that there's been various refusals by the council, some of which have gone to appeal, and the inspectors for a time were with us. What the inspectors have decided more recently in the last few years is that because you're going to have to land take from the green belt elsewhere in this district to meet provision, then those sites may well be green belt, just like this site is now. And that's primarily one of the reasons the inspector granted permission for the 2 pitches in the first place, because what provision you would need to make would be on a site that is probably greenbelt then or greenbelt today. So the greenbelt argument in this situation, officers feel falls away, and therefore we're recommending to you that the application be approved, subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you, Mike. There are no public speakers for this item. Any ward members wishing to speak? Any committee members wishing to speak? We'll first take Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. I've referred this item on the grounds of the intensification of that site with the amount of homes that are actually going to go on there, and for the viability, I don't know the distance of the caravans. I think there is a regulatory distance for caravans on open sites. That's caravan sites that are used for 90 days or part of the year, where part of the year you don't use them for ordinary caravan sites. So I'm concerned about the distance of those caravans and how they're parked. Plus, I would like to bring to attention to the committee of policy H of the National Planning Policy for Gypsy and Traveller Sites states that potential traveller sites should be well planned and soft landscaped, as well as the National Planning Policy for Gypsy and Traveller Sites 2023 document, which sits alongside the NPPF, considers gypsy and traveller sites temporary or permanent in the Greenbelt to be inappropriate development, which is the reason why I've brought this intensification part to the notice of the committee. It would seem that I can't say what's going to happen in the future, but this is an indication of what is going to happen to families for the future, that they will get larger and larger and we will find more on that site. Now, there are only 3 residential families close by. This outweighs the 3 residential families by far. It is not a balance of which the NPPF like to put forward in their way of putting people in the gypsy and travellers in the community. This far outweighs the community, and it looks to be very prevalent that we need to control this in some shape or form. There will be 2 rooms, if you like, where they probably would do cooking or whatever the case is. But those rooms can be used as residential. They can be slept in. And there is, although we do not control it, we haven't got enforcement officers that can control it, but on the understanding of what's happened in the past, it doesn't look very helpful in the future. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. As representatives of the residents in the area, I'm sure that ward councillors are concerned about this from the point of view of the objections that have been raised from residents. The unfortunate history of this is that we have had many applications come for gypsy and traveller sites in the district, and the committee have in the past historically turned them down. We have then had to go through the situation of going to appeal, and because we lack the statutory number of allocation of gypsy and traveller sites in the area, it is an unfortunate conclusion that every time the appeal ends up in favour of the applicant. So when we're looking at this, we have to look at this from a point of view of what can we defend on any objections on this. The objections that Councillor Stanley has raised are ones that have been raised before, and unfortunately, when it's gone through appeal, they have not been allowed. I haven't heard, now I stand to be corrected on this, but I haven't heard of any trouble that this particular pitch has caused in the site there. I don't know, but I haven't heard. So that may be something to bear in mind. The other thing is as well that if we do approve this as a council, it goes, the 3 extra pitches go towards our allocation. And so it's helping the council. Now, I realise that that's a very contentious point of view, but that is pretty much all I can say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eaves. Members, please be minded of Councillor Eaves' comments regarding the appeals, but we have to consider this on the material planning conditions. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. This is one for Mike Stranks. How many sites are we now short? Gypsy and Travellers sites. We know we should have 15 at Michelin's Farm that haven't come forward. We know all the history about that. But how, because we've lost so many appeals, how many Gypsy and Travellers sites are we short of the number that is required? Thank you.
Chairman, it's 23 pitches we are short. One of the things you have to bear in mind, and maybe Emma can help me out here, is that when you're given figures from various assessments, there are, if you like, different plan periods. They overlap. So what the policy boys have to do is try and work out what's our figure at any one time. So you may have heard before, I think at the time of the allocations, that we needed 15 pitches, and you're asking yourself, well, why is that now more? It's because we've got the shortfall in the provision in the previous plan period, plus then the new need, and we have new assessments that come out. And to compound matters slightly, the national definition of a traveller has been changed as a result of a test case, whereby you now have to count people who have given up the travelling way of life. So your need has jumped, but the figure that you ask for is 23, but the criteria that's achieved those figures over time has changed, which is why you may sit there thinking, well, it used to be this, it used to be that. As I say, you have to keep up with how it's to be counted in the first place, and then what is your requirement this year. Next year you may be, or that's a bit short, in a few years' time you may be given a fresh figure in the light of whatever counts. There is faith in our current count figure, because over the region there's been difficulties in engaging the travelling community to get accurate figures. But in Rochford, I think the people doing the count were accompanied by planning officers and the enforcement team in particular, and there's a reasonably good reputation of our people with the travellers, so they were able to divulge their plans and interests, which mean that we've got a very high, if you like, success rate of what the figure actually is. So I think members have got some confidence in this figure of 23 that on appeal, the agents would try and ridicule, because nationally the figure is a bit more difficult to prove. So we're confident in telling you 23, if that helps, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, Councillor Page and myself took 2 hours to come to that conclusion the other day, because it is not a simple calculation. Does that answer your question, Mrs. Shaw? Could I?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I do have other questions, but can I just go back to Councillor Stanley, because he did actually have a question he asked regarding the size of the plots?
My question was, what distance were the caravans allowed to park? I know there is a safe distance of fire prevention should one of those caravans happen to catch light or something like that. Can I just point out to the committee that in the case of the travelling community, they don't always want to mix with each other. They want to stay as a whole of their own.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stanley, on that one. Could we have an answer regarding the first part of that question, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's not actually a planning matter. When you have caravan sites, the planning authority gives a permission for the use of the land, as it were.
Okay.
And then site licence management dealt with by, I think, environmental health. My understanding is, if it helps members, is that normally the caravans for fire reasons should be 6 metres apart. But that's only what I've picked up years ago from environmental health colleagues. That may have changed, but to give you an idea, 6 metres apart.
Thank you, Mr. Shanks. Councillor Myers.
Yeah, just a quick question, just to get it straight in my head, really. This has got turned down by the planning committee, went for appeal, and then came back to the council. Could I ask why the enforcement officer attended the site in the first place, and the timescale of that? Is this amended application as a result of that visit? Because if the enforcement officer hadn't attended, would we still be looking at 2 caravans, even though there's lots more there now?
Chairman, it's slightly out of order to what I have. But I think
Mr. Franks, 1 second, please. Okay. Mr. Shranks has actually got some further information on that, which I was relating to. So if you could.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand from enforcement colleagues that additional caravans were brought onto the site on 23rd of January 23. And there was, I think, reported by members of the public that said they'd seen them advertised for rent. So our enforcement officer went down there on the 25th of January, a couple of days later, made contact with the landowner, okay? And how enforcement actually works, you often hear the public say, why didn't you throw the book at them and things like that? The government doesn't want councils actually to be that hard. You could end up in court and a judge saying to you, why didn't you give them the opportunity for the planning committee to consider the changes and things like that? So there tends to be a slower approach to give, even though those people have brought things in conflict with Greenbelt policy, haven't made a planning application, and the guidance often says, you know, you can give weight, if you're so minded, to the fact that things have been retrospective. But back to the point, the applicant then engaged a planning professional to submit a planning application, which came in February 23. Unfortunately, it's taken us till now to bring this before you. So the applicant, if you think from January 23 to February 23 making a planning application, that wasn't really that bad. I think the enforcement officer went down there within a couple of days, gave them the opportunity to move off or apply. They chose to apply, and here we are.
Well,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's just, it got clear in my head. So basically, I mean, you could say that the only reason he's put this application in is because it's been caught out.
We can surmise, but he did put it in. We have an answer in respect of that. Councillor Mrs. Newport.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, if I may, to Mr. Stranks. In the information that you've just given us, you said about there was an advert for them to rent. Is that what you said? Sorry.
Yes, Chairman. When it was reported to us, I think members of the public had been able to see from the pictures that showed them for rent. They could work out the buildings around because they were familiar with them, and they sent to the office the fact that there was either 2 or 3 caravans, I believe, and that they were being advertised for market rent. So we went down there and checked it out. I don't know what the applicants told the enforcement officer. Mrs. Dunn isn't here to help with that. But the upshot of it was they made an application within a few weeks, which I think is a fairly short turnaround. Normally people take a lot longer. You've got to find an agent who can do the work and then submit the planning application. They seem to have done that fairly quickly. The delay in this case is down to us not having dealt with it for like over a year, 18 months.
So if I may, Chair, just to come back on that. So initially they were for rent, not for their family members. That's correct.
Chairman, we don't know that. We've got the advert, I think, that was sent in with the inquiry, but I don't think the applicants have ever made any claim to us that they're going to rent them out. The application before you is for the extended family as set out in the report.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, if I may, I did have another question that's not related to that one. The road at the bottom, not Goldsmith Drive, but the other unmade road, could you just clarify what that one is, please?
Chairman, that's a horse riding track that was called Lubbard's Farm. They used to have horses there, and then they went out of horses. So that's the perimeter ride that went around the people stabling there and others used to use. I'm not sure actually if it's part of a bridle path. I know there's a bridle path that goes up this side of Holbridge Road, presumably into that, or whether the landowner connected into that to make a ride that everybody can use accessing from the bridle.
Thank you.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very concerned about the over-occupation of the site. They say these are for family members. Now, as these family members grow up, are we going to see another 3, 4, 5 caravans? I'm very concerned that the growth of this site, and we could end up with another mini Dale Farm here with the sheer numbers there. They're all going to grow up, they're all going to go to work, they're going to be backwards and forwards. and it's over-intensification of the
Councillor
site.
Constable, thank you for that. We've got to make our decisions based on the application put in front of us.
Well, that is it, isn't it? Surely it's the over-intensification of the site. That's
Actually,
my main point is over-intensification.
Condition 2 actually states that. Six 6.226, condition 2, recommendation.
Which page you on?
6.2.26.
Which one are you quoting me, Mr. Chairman, on that? Number 2?
Conditions 2.
Right. Right, so basically then, at the moment, we are looking to be over-intensifying this exact site, which is what I'm saying I'm against. It's making the site bigger and more intensified than what it was originally intended for. So it's over-intensification of the site. Too many caravans there.
Okay. Mr. Shanks.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I'm in members' hands. That is one way of looking at it. Clearly, there's a further intensification of use. I mean, you mentioned Dale Farm, which was an absolute monster, I think, of some that were lawful, but most that weren't. And we know what happened there. The situation with regards to our recommendation changes once the council gets the 32 pitches approved allocation. We would be advising against you differently. Now, that doesn't necessarily stop some history, but it is something that members have to take into account. I think this wouldn't be likely to form Dale Farm, but what you have here, which is I think the point being made, is that children of the people living there have grown into now a few years on needing families of their own, and they're asking for 3 extra caravans. And I think members have got to judge on the need overall that will probably be met from some or pieces of Green Belt. It's been mentioned that perhaps the best solution is not to put a load of sites in one place. Some members may remember that we went to the Gypsy site near the Colchester United ground. I don't know how many members are with us that went on that, Severals Lane. And they said a site bigger than 12 doesn't work because of the issues that members have raised. So without putting anything in front of the policy planners in the council, they might be looking for a solution of smaller sites rather than trying to put all your allocation in one site, such as we've had at Michelin's Farm, which has been unsuccessful. But the issue in planning is that you have a shortfall at the moment that we're advising you must need. You must make the judgment as to whether this is acceptable on its own merits. Intensification is an issue. I'm not sure where I've seen in reports from neighbours about the numbers of travellers would outnumber the residential settled community, but that's more of a social issue. I think the point was made is, does that lead to successful integration? And you've got to think of that in your reasoning tonight. But it is an intensification of use. I wouldn't guide you down the road of overdevelopment that you see with residential properties, where sometimes the plots are too small, they haven't got the garden areas, they overlook, all those sort of things. This is quite a big piece of land that, in officers' view, can take the amount of quantum of development that is being proposed. I mean, I don't know about the site licence, but that looks to me, if you take the car parking spaces that are in the other plan, they look 6 metres apart. So with slight adjustment, if needed, would probably meet licensing, but I don't deal with that. So if it fits, if the layout works, there's plenty of turning and manoeuvring room. There's a landscape setting at the front. I don't think you could call this overdevelopment. Members haven't said that, but if that's the way you're thinking in terms of the use of a specific piece of land, there is room here for the development that is being proposed, if that helps, Chair.
Councillor Constable.
I think my point is still the same, but 3 caravans on that small area is over intensification. We've got no measurements to tell us that it's any different to overdevelopment, and that's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stanley, did we answer your questions last time, or would you like to come back?
No, I've got another couple of questions, if you don't mind, Chair. This map that we've got here doesn't show the vehicles that would be used on site. So we could possibly have up to 10 vehicles on that site. And there's nothing there to say where they're going to be. Are they going to be out in the road? Where are they going to put? They won't be able to turn round in that location with 10 vehicles in that location with caravans on the back of them, for sure. The other thing is, could we make a condition that any of the caravans will not be out or will not be used for commercial services in the way of renting or letting out the caravans, please?
Councillor Stranks, can it be put in a condition of how many vehicles are actually on the site? And could you answer Councillor Stanley's both questions?
I'm not a member, Chairman, but you'll see at condition 2, it's a personal permission to the users. Now, there is some difficulty enforcing that to find out that the users were not those named, but that is something not uncommon that, if need be, enforcement officers could try and track down. But that the recommendation to you is the way it is for that very issue, that the travelling community here have put in an application. They've explained their circumstances with the family, the children are waiting to go to school, that sort of thing. So therefore, that's necessitated, in officers' view, an adaptation of the permission, a new permission that they have that would cover those persons. So if somebody other than those named or their dependents were to occupy the site, they would be in breach of that consent. In reality, what might happen is, say a new traveller was offered one of those units, they might say, well, I need accommodation. They bring an application before you. The enforcement of it, as I explained earlier, might come as a latter stage, depending on how members decide if that other member of the family or new member was to come on the site. But the personal conditions that you're being recommended, in my view, cover that.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Going back to the conditions on 6.2.26, number 2, it says when the land ceases to be occupied by Mr. Patrick O'Brien and Miss Ellen O'Brien, it will be cleared. Now, as we're not sure who is actually the named people, have we got enough enforcement officers to keep going down there to make sure the mum and dad are still living?
Mr. Stranks.
Sorry, Mike.
I would say we haven't got enough enforcement officers, and I've probably said the wrong thing generally, okay, forgive me. It's more an issue of how you check somebody who's named to be there. You've got to have some means of identification, like you know them. I mean, we're lucky our enforcement officers know these people by face. But if we lost those officers and got new staff in who didn't know, there'd be a period of time when they'd get to know who they are. Remember, when the counting is done, the environmental health officers get to know the families as well. If they stick around, you get that benefit of them knowing. If they change, then new faces, there's that period of time. So it is enforceable, but it's not easy, okay? But it's not impossible. The conditions that are being recommended like this are used across the country. They're not peculiar to Rochford. So other authorities and inspectors have found them useful. I'm not denying that they can be problematic in getting sometimes the detail, particularly if people don't want to tell you, but it is there. And when they've got the information, however long it may take, then they've got to consider whether there is action that can be taken.
Thank you, Mike. I just wanted to put it on record that that question had been asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. Do we know how big the whole site is? How big is the whole site, including the landscaped bit, please?
Chairman, it's 3,675 square metres. I would imagine that's the red bit. Or sorry, no, it is. It's all the bit that includes the landscape bit at the front. That's 0.3 of a hectare, and getting on for 0.4 of a hectare.
So is that an acre? Is that approximately an acre?
Approximately an acre. There's 2.4 acres to a hectare.
Thank
so
you.
if this is the 0.4, it's about half an acre.
Okay, thank you.
Caroline Corrigan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back on a couple of the points that were raised about over-intensification. So your report, the report before you sets out that this is an application for a total of 3 additional pitches for residential occupation of a gypsy and traveller family that is associated with the existing family that has permission on site. So in terms of over-intensification, if you're looking at reasons for refusal, then you need to identify where the harm is. At the moment, and again, as the report sets out, that the members of that family are already living on site in overcrowded conditions and with a number of children under the age of 5. So in terms of when you're coming to weigh up, it's just to remind the committee to go back and look at your green belt balance that the officer has set out for you, starting with, as Mr. Strank said earlier, the lack of sites and available sites in the borough, and the need for gypsy and traveller sites that have been identified, and that difference between where we are at the moment and where we need to be. And that's a big consideration. The Greenbelt consideration and the harm to the Greenbelt is weighs heavily, but so does the needs of the children, possibly even about an equal balance. The map doesn't show where vehicles on the site would be parked, but you can condition the number of commercial vehicles, for example, and how big those commercial vehicles on site can be, and the tonnage. And just to go back on the compliance side of things, that the caravan count that happens twice a year is a way in which you can not necessarily check, but that's a way but the council keeps records and an understanding of who is on each individual pitch, and that information goes into the GTAA and how we manage as a district the number of sites that we need and the growing needs, which is something that we can't shy away from. There is potentially a growing need and it has to be addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stuart Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Caroline, can I just ask you, you said about putting a condition on about the number of vehicles and the size and the type. What would such a condition look like?
So that could look like there'd be no more than 2 commercial vehicles per pitch. I mean, this would depend on where we think it's practicable and how big that site is. We know it's a fairly substantial site, but you could say no more than 4 commercial vehicles or 2 commercial vehicles by the use of the occupiers of each pitch. No, and they shouldn't exceed 3.5 tonnes in weight. And that's quite a standard condition that many inspectors would apply to a permission.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Stanley.
Sorry to keep coming back, Chair, but could we put a condition on for only, how can I put this, there should not be any heavy equipment to be left on site, only can we put it down as not hand tools, but general tools rather than heavy equipment, such as forklift trucks and things like that? Can a condition be put on to stop that happening? It's the reason that I say this is that the road is used by all the residents, and because we have a larger community of travellers using the road will become unbearable for traffic for the standard residents that are sitting there trying to do their business that they are doing. So with that in mind, and I know we can't put a condition on the road because the road doesn't belong to any one of those people there, and I don't know who the road belongs to as it's unmade. My other concern is that there would be, I think, if I'm right, 15 waste bins for the whole site. That's 3 for every occupant. So there isn't a bin store there. I don't know how you are going to put 15 bins waiting to be collected, whether it's every other week or whatever it is, but there is no bin store there. And there's no way of the lorry getting into that site that I know of, only in the road. So.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley.
Thank you.
Mike Stranks.
Yeah, Chairman, 2 things. Dealing with the bins first. I think at the moment, the residents park them in the splay up at the top here, but they have land here forming part of the site. You could put a condition on that requires them to submit details for bin enclosures. Your guidance for the refuse guys is they don't haul, I think, beyond 25 metres, something like that. So with schemes like this, there would be an expectation that the applicant would put a facility close to the collection point, but that would need to be in an enclosure suitably designed, etc., and also to allow air to flow through rather than a building, depending on what they agree. If I could just come back on the question of vehicle size. In the previous decision on this site, the inspector gave a condition that said, save for one vehicle not exceeding 7.5 tonnes in weight, no vehicles over 3.5 tonnes in weight shall be stations parked or stored in the land. Now that is easier because a lot of vehicles have plates where you can check the weight if you had to. If you start getting into not a forklift truck, what if they bring a tractor and you haven't specified tractor or something, you get into that. So weight is a good one. It's a part of the suite of conditions that inspectors have used in these type of appeals before, if that helps you.
Thank you, Mr. Stranks. The meeting has now lasted nearly 2 hours. While we take into consideration the conditions in respect of this application, I would like to move a motion without notice in line with Committee Procedure Rule 9 to extend the meeting for as long as necessary in order to complete the business. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Would show of hands, please. In favour. Against? Abstain? Thank you. We will now take a 10-minute break. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
Can we do that before making a decision then? Can we take a break? Because I didn't think we could go out and then come back and vote if we'd left the room. Take a break.
Okay, I will go straight to the vote. It's just so we could have put the conditions in place. Mr. Stranks, do you have those conditions? Which members?
We're going to go and get Councillor Stanley or something.
Councillor Stanley's just behind you.
I just need a moment to list those, but I think what we're talking of is the limit on weight, which was my last point, and a refuse collection. That's it. The bin store and the size of vehicles is the only 2 I have. I don't know if, in addition to those recommended.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs. Wilson.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, yeah, it's a long night. Just so that I'm perfectly clear, that if this recommendation to approve was approved, that all the conditions listed plus the 2 you've just clarified will stand on the application. Yes.
Yes, Chairman. That if you approve, the decision would leave this room with the conditions we've recommended, providing you've not got issue with any of those, plus the 2 that I've picked up that we've recently talked about. Just while I'm in, not wishing to prolong or delay things, if you look back to what the inspector said, they said one vehicle not exceeding 7.5 tonnes. That was with 2 pitches. It's whether you wish to add a second vehicle not exceeding 7.5 tonnes, because you'll now have 5 pitches. But I'm in your hands as to whether you want to leave it at that or whether you want to proportion the 7.5 tonners amongst the size of the site that it would now be. I'd need guidance on that.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think that's a really good idea to put that condition forward that you've just mentioned. And I'd like to come back as well, Chair.
Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, yeah, I would like that condition put in for the, for two, as,
I'll second that.
okay, yeah, Chair, I'd like to put that forward as a motion for 2 vehicles.
That motion is before you to limit the site to 2 7.5 tonne vehicles.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? That is carried.
Chairman, do let me speak against that, because it is the condition that if you allow these heavy vehicles on the road which is unmade, who is going to repair the road that these 7.5 tonnes are travelling on? It's bad enough having a 22-tonne lorry coming up to empty more bins and more weight on that road, but we do not own the road to repair. And are we going to then ask the occupants to repair the road with these 7.5 tonne vehicles running up and down? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Caroline Corrigan.
Sorry, thank you. It was just in earlier, in response to Councillor Stanley's earlier point about storage of those types of vehicles and maybe their approach on that unmade road that, no, the vote's already been taken, but you could add in a condition to say no commercial activities to take place on the land, including the storage of those materials or vehicles for commercial activities. So while there may be some commercial vehicles on site which then leave the site because they're going off site to go and work, in terms of actually storing anything to do with a commercial activity taking place on the site, you could condition that. I don't think there's any answer to your unmade road issue if it's not owned by highways.
I'm afraid that
Councillor Stanley.
Through you, Chair, that doesn't actually help when you're driving a 7.5 tonne backwards and forwards, maybe 3-4 times a day, 5 times a day. We don't know how many times a day that 7.5 tonne vehicle is going to be in and out of that occupant. So I really, it's enough to have one, let alone now we've got another one, which means that road will have to be looked after by those people that use it most.
Councillor Stanley, I think what we're saying is we're limiting it to 2. At the moment, it's limited to 1, but we're also trying to stop other commercial vehicles going down onto site.
It's not limiting commercial vehicles going down to the site or any of the sites down there. It's just that if you increase your tonnage on the road, somewhere or other, the road is going to have to be repaired. And if we are not committing the occupants of this site to repair the road, which we are not, but we're allowing them to put extra tonnage on the road, it doesn't equate.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. That has been noted. We have gone to vote and we voted for that condition to be put in. So I would now like to move the motion from the chair that the recommendation is to determine the application, having considered all the evidence, and approve the application subject to the conditions set out on pages 6.2.26 to 6.2.29 of the report, and the 2 additional conditions that have been laid before you today. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Eaves. Now we can vote for those in favour. Those against? Those abstaining? That motion is carried. 9 for, 2 against, 2 abstentions. We will now go for a 5-minute break. We have a wonky live stream at the moment, so we're just waiting for the technical issue to be fixed. Members, please. Technology has now restored. Thank you, members. I would like now to take item 7, 2301009 full, site of 33 and 35 Castle Road, Rayleigh, Essex. I'm now going to ask Mike Stranks, who will be presenting the report, but please note the second item that he's going to refer you to. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Before we get into the details of the application on the screen, this application is brought to the committee in the interests of transparency because the applicant has declared being related to Councillor Cross. And you'll see, I think, in the report that it says that he's his brother. I think this has been a mistake by the architect because Councillor Cross has felt it necessary to contact us and point out that Councillor Cross is the applicant's great uncle, not a sibling. So he would ask members to note that correction just as a point of fact. Now, the second point that the chair was alluding to, there are actually 2 applications with the council on this site. And what we're dealing with tonight is solely an application which I'll describe for a single dwelling replacing these 2 here. We are, of course, aware that there's an application for some flatted development in the back here and part of that scheme, but that scheme is not before members tonight. Okay, so if that's clear, that will come back to members on a future date for the same reason this would, whether you refer it because of the association of the applicant with Councillor Cross, it will come to committee as a matter of course when we've been able to assess the application and put it before you. So on with the application we have tonight. It's for the replacement of the existing pair of dwellings. Just to orientate yourself, Castle Road running along the diagonal here, and Castle Close at the top, the Castle Road car park here, the Rayleigh Conservation Area on this scale over here somewhere with the car park intervening, and Britton Court, those members familiar with it, behind the site. Frontage development, as you see along here. This site is a little unusual in the fact it's quite an extensive site that goes behind the existing frontage development on Castle Road. If we can jump to the proposed site layout plan 2, please. Here we see that the site shape outlined with all the various outbuildings and that are there at the current time. We're primarily looking at this point here where the pair of semi-detached dwellings have been demolished. They're similar to this pair here, but they're proposed to be demolished and a new 3-bedroom detached house built here as you see it, with a access way here and 2 car parking spaces in the front garden of the new dwelling proposed. Council's policy H1, while seeking to protect the character of existing settlements and resisting intensification generally, nevertheless allows for development that would relate well to existing street patterns. Although the buildings demolished are an older semi-detached pair, the actual site frontage, which includes the land to the side, so the width, it's always useful in my view to measure what they call it the face of the building, because what you're looking at is how the building would have enough side space, meter side space, things like that. That dimension at that part is only 13.29 metres. And if this had been an application for a pair of semis, your guidance would require a plot width of 15.25, another 1.96 metres. So under your current guidance, although we'd be demolishing a semi-detached pair, you would perhaps be hesitant at approving another semi-detached pair in this same position because it wouldn't meet your guidance. The guidance does go on to say that you can look at plot width that compares to the street, and you've got the existing dwellings and the pairs that are retained here. But on balance, officers have considered that, well, this one lone dwelling is acceptable because it complies with your detailed standards. I do realise that there's been representations made at people saying about the loss of the dwelling. And as I say, hopefully that's clear that a second dwelling would give us a slight problem recommending to you an undersized pair. It's also argued by the applicant that actually number 33, which I think is the one closest to the access road, has been in a poor state of repair with no modernisation, things like no central heating and an outside toilet. I've only been able to do a couple of drive pasts for you, but from curbside, it's got a front door, looks reasonably tidy, but I can't tell you what the condition is inside. The applicant is saying it's not worthy of refurbishment, and therefore they've put this application in for you to consider. In terms of the size, a 3-bedroom dwelling should have, to the national standards, 84 or 93 square metres gross floor space with 2 square metres storage, depending on the size of the bedrooms. This design would propose 113 square metres gross, so it exceeds that, and with 2.7 square metres of storage, so it exceeds that. 2 bedrooms would be larger than the minimum, so they would both be doubles with 1 single at 7.5 square metres, so it's a 5-person 3-bedroom house. The proposal would provide the 2 car parking spaces I pointed to at first, and the garden area, it's so large we haven't measured it, but it's over 1,000 square metres shown on that plan, whereas you'd only require normally 100 square metres. Side isolation is 1.2 metres here at the face, tapering down slightly to 1 at the rear, and on the other side, on the eastern side adjoining number 37, is 4.7 metres. So the gap between the building and the site boundary here, 4.77 metres. So in conclusion on the standards, it because of the size of the plot and the size of the building, they exceed your space standards. If we could just look at the plans and elevations, please. Just in design terms, members familiar with the site will recall that there is a sort of a canopy detail and some bay windows in the existing buildings to demolish. The architect has brought that feature forward in this design. It's a brand new building, but he's picked up on 1 or 2 themes. It's pitched to the street like the existing buildings. On the rear, there is a projection which is gabled, which, you know, the existing building isn't large enough to feature, is hipped. The existing building isn't large enough to feature that projection. So being a larger building, he's kept the modesty of the front elevations and the interest, but the building extends at the back. You'll notice how the pitching leans away from the roof edge to give you a nice detail. Not necessarily best shown in the darkness of that layout, but you might see it better here on the roof plan. So we say it's a good design, acceptable in the street scene of Castle Road, which is fairly mixed. The materials that they're seeking is a natural Spanish slate, which I think is good. It's not in the conservation area, so it's not something we would insist on, but the architect is going a step further with that. There is an interesting brickwork. It's like a white burnt colour. It isn't precedented in the street, but it seems to be a good quality brick. I wouldn't advise you against that just because it's different. It seems to be a good quality and would go well with the Welsh slate that's being proposed. The only slight issue is there's an ensuite window on the side. Members familiar with these kind of plans will know that's quite typical, putting the services on the side where you can easily obscure glaze it. We're recommending to you that despite the gap to the adjoining neighbour of over 4 metres, that window is obscure glaze. That's in condition 10 of the recommendation, which is Chairman approval, subject to those other conditions set out in the report.
Thank you, Mike. There's one public speaker for this item. The speaker is Miss Aitken, who will speak in objection to the application. If could Miss Aitken come forward? And I'd like to remind you, you have 5 minutes. I will remind you with 1 minute remaining. Mike, if you could assist, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name's Melanie Atkin and I live at 39 Castle Road. I'm here to represent my family and a collection of neighbours and residents of Castle Road in objection to the most recent planning application in relation to 3335 Castle Road. We have all lived in Castle Road for many years, decades even, and have been afforded the luxury of not having to suffer any development close by. We feel we are more than qualified to offer the following statement. When Mrs. Welsh first submitted the former abhorrent application to build a detached property in a block of flats at the back of 37, 39 and 41 Castle Road, it was unthinkable There would have been a huge negative impact on the care home Britain Court also, situated on the opposite boundary. We collectively cited many reasons, along with a petition of 400 plus signatures, as to why this should not be approved, and noted that not one resident was actually in agreement with the proposed application. Many of these reasons are still valid for the current application. Again, not one resident has been for the proposed development. These reasons include drainage. Despite 37 and 39 Castle Road sharing drainage, it should be noted that a culvert runs from Old Brickfield Pond to the site of the old Anchor Brewery and Maltings. The culvert runs underground through wells located in the rear gardens of these properties and number 41 Castle Road, and should be a consideration should any groundworks need to be undertaken. Privacy. Potentially any future residents of the detached house could put anything in their garden, thereby overlooking our gardens. This could be anything from a child's trampoline to a garden bar or office. Trees. Several large trees were removed from the site before the tree survey was even carried out. This appears to have devastated the bird population. Noise. This was mainly a concern during the proposed development phase. Parking, again, more relative to the construction traffic and heavy plant that will be required during the proposed development phase. Wildlife. With the loss of trees, wildlife has been lost. Nothing can be done about this now, but it seems as though no thought was given to the consequence of reducing such large, beautiful trees and the wildlife contained therein. Bats used to be seen most evenings, and although it's unknown to us where they roost, they're certainly not as prevalent as they were. We feel a bat survey should be carried out prior to proposed demolition. Boundary. This application has a direct and major effect on the boundaries of 37, 39 and 41 Castle Road. There is an outbuilding at the back of number 39, which is literally on the fence. The proposed driveway adjacent to number 37, which probably isn't too different to the existing layout, but with the doubt that Mr Harperwood could resurrect an application to build flats as previously sought, would raise a very different objection. The residents of these three properties all separately wrote to Mrs Welsh in 2023, kindly asking if each share of land would possibly be available to buy back. Mrs Welsh had previously bought each piece of land from previous owners. We have yet to receive a response. Highways. There does not appear to be a traffic management plan uploaded to the planning documents, just a letter from Essex County Council citing that no development shall take place until a construction management plan has been submitted and approved. How Castle Road is to be navigated through any major construction work is of paramount importance to us all. This road is heavy with traffic most days now, but more importantly, a large number of school children use it every day. The development at the top of Castle Road has just recently been subject to a fire in the skip located just off the pavement. May I draw your attention to section 2.3 of the officer's report, page 7.5. This section states that the former application reference 2300482 FUL for the house and block. Oh, sorry.
Carry on.
Thank you. For the house and block of flats is not yet determined. If that means it hasn't been refused yet, I'm sure you can understand our reluctance to agree any planning application on this site. How do we know that it won't be applied for again and indeed agreed in the future? The officer's report, section 1.3, page 7.4, also states, following the completion of the proposed works, many of these outbuildings will remain in situ. However, the design and access statement provided by BGA Architects states there are numerous outbuildings within the grounds of 35 Castle Road, all of which will remain on site. This should be clarified and noted that some of the recent outbuildings were actually built without adhering to relevant planning requirements. Legal covenants are held on all odd number properties, which could leave developers open to legal action if they were not adhered to. In particular, from 19 to 71 Castle Road, all hold covenants and many also have easements. As Land Registry does not have any information listed on 33 Castle Road, it would be prudent to seek this information prior to making a decision.
Thank you, Ms Akins. Your 5 minutes up. Thank you very much. Ward members taking priority. Are there any members who would like to speak? Committee members wishing to speak? Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got I don't know whether it's a problem, but it looks at the map, but is the adjacent area to the property, is that to be fenced? Is that to be fenced off? I mean, is the whole property the whole layout, or is it to end at certain point? What is the property's dimensions? And also the parking spaces, I can't see how if those are cars or supposed to be cars, how does the car nearest to the house get off of the property?
Mr.
Or is
Shranks.
it the other way round?
Thank you, Councillor
Thank
Stanley.
you.
Mr. Shranks.
Chairman, we've zoomed in, but we'll stay there for a moment, Claire, to deal with the other first. But you'll see, I think there's a fence and gates that is shown there. I think I can just read that. Your site of your application is the whole of the area edge red, which is why I was issuing about. And you mentioned about the outbuildings, but I think they're showing what they are to be retained. Okay. Now, if we can jump back down to the site frontage, the 2 car parking spaces for a house of this size, you have to demonstrate 2 car parking spaces. It's within a town centre and it's adjoining a public car park. So county highways would only ask you as a maximum to provide 2 spaces, and the vehicles would come in here and manoeuvre in this space here and reverse in and out to come out, ideally in perhaps a forward gear. There is some issue of conflict, probably because all the traffic coming through to the car park, I think they come in this way and go out through Castle Close. So the designer has used this access point because he doesn't want a vehicle conflict. Highways prefer if you can get some distance so that drivers don't get confused when they see somebody signalling to go into their driving. They don't think that driver's coming in there and make a sudden screech brake stop or something like that. So this isn't a bad way of dealing with the problem by putting the access to the dwelling away from the access to the more trafficked car park. But they would come in off that access, they would manoeuvre here and enter and leave the site in that way. I haven't got for you the size, other than what's in the report, which hopefully is there, the size of the building in terms of meters and things like that. But I'd like to think, I'd have a job to find it, but I think it's somewhere in the report. This case officer normally itemises.
It is in the report, thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Can I come back, Chair? Yeah. If they, what I'm trying to get at is the size, is the distance between the boundary at the front and the boundary of the house, whether that would accommodate the large vehicles that we are now seeing on the road. It's all very well putting in a Mini, but we don't have Minis anymore. We have large vehicles, and I didn't know, it doesn't show.
Mr. Franks, thank you,
exactly
Councillor
what that is.
Stanley.
Thank you.
Chairman, I take the point. It's difficult to plan for those. So what the county did in 2009, they upped the standard. They went to say that instead of your car parking spaces being as little as 4.8 metres deep, they needed to be 5.5. And instead of being 2.4 wide, they now have to be 2.9 wide. Okay, so the space standards would require a space. It doesn't have to meet the highway at 90 degrees, although that's preferred. I was making the point that if you did have them come on the forecourt, which would need to be a minimum of 5.5 metres at the shorter side, which if that's 2 car parking spaces width, that's at least 5 metres. So then with that bit there, it's going to be close, yeah? If you have them coming in here at 90 degrees in a conventional manner, in my view, I'm not a highways engineer, but you've got a conflict with traffic turning here. This architect has responded to that by putting this access here and having these served off this part. So they don't make so much conflict there. So they're going to come in and they're going to turn across the front garden. They might well park up closer to the door as some people do. But there seems to be, in officers' view, there seems to be adequate space here to put vehicles on that would give you your 5.5 metre deep space. Whether that's big enough for the vehicle of the owner, the future owner would have to decide whether the car is big enough for their home. But you can't plan for Range Rovers down to Minis. County have settled on a size which fits that in that arrangement.
Councillor Stanley.
I did notice there isn't a bin store, which, where would they actually put the bins? I mean,
Councillor Stanley, the plot of land is actually quite enormous, so I'm quite sure they'll find somewhere to put the bins on there. Thank you.
it's getting out of the vehicles that I'm particularly worried about when it's bucketing down the rain.
Councillor
How do you
Stanley,
get out of
the land is substantial. They'll find
it
somewhere
is?
to put.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Somewhere to put the bins. Any other questions? Councillor Page.
Yeah, excuse me, and because it's a little bit convoluted, because we're talking about this one, but there could be another one coming forward. So the one on the side, that's just a right of access, isn't it?
Councillor Page, could you speak into your microphone,
Sorry,
please?
the position on the right-hand side is a right of access, and we can't actually see what the real garden is. At the moment, it's pretending to be this vast area. But we don't know how big the real garden's going to be, do we?
I've got a good idea if it helps, Chairman, but I
Yeah.
think that the issue is, this is the application before
I
you
understand,
tonight.
that's what I'm getting
When the other
confused
one
with.
comes to you,
Yes,
you can be reassured that this dwelling sits basically in the same position
yes,
and has a garden area of 100 square metres or more, I haven't measured,
yeah.
behind it. So
Right.
things like bin stores and things, it will have its own amenity space. Then what will be before you is how that all fits with the access and things like that there. But it would perhaps be wrong at the moment to say that this
Councillor
forms an
Strange, we're
access-
actually straying from we got an application in front of us. Councillor Page, is that? Thank you. Can I remind everybody, we're talking on material planning considerations, and we've got one application in front of us, which is for the site of 33 and 35 Castle Road, Rayleigh. Is there any other questions that? I'll proceed to a motion from the chair to recommend approval of the application subject to conditions set out on pages 7.1 to 7.4 of the report. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson. Councillor Mrs. Wilson. Can we vote by a show of hands those in favour of this application? Those against? Anybody abstaining? That motion has passed 12-4, 1 abstention. Thank you very much. Members, that concludes our business for the evening. I thank you very much for your attendance. Meeting ended at 22:09. Thank you.